Hey blues fans, glad you're here. Time for another episode of This Week of the Blues. It's our weekly take on blues history. I'm your host, Jimbo Big Train Matson, with Big Train and the Locomotives. Now we had one of our viewers write in and ask if it would be okay if they submitted suggestions on, different people that they felt we should cover. And it's like, absolutely. Tell us about the blues artists that are out there. Currently, out on the road, hitting venues, hitting festivals. Also tell us about the blues artists that have kind of come and gone, that made an impact and have kind of faded into obscurity, but still need to have their story told. So we have our daily blues history post on our social media like Facebook and Instagram. And then we also do the weekly, This Week in the Blues. So we're always looking for good ideas. So send them our way. So with that, let's take a look and see what happened this week in blues history. Blues guitar player Kenny Neal was born October 14th, 1957 in New Orleans. Neal preserves the blues sound of his native South Louisiana, as you would expect from someone who learned the blues from Slim Harpo, Buddy Guy, and his father, harmonica player Raphael Neal. He comes from a musical family and has often performed with his brothers. Blues guitarist Jimmy Liggins was born October 14th in 1918 in Newby, Oklahoma, which is the home state of Big Train and the Locomotives. When he was in his teens, he moved with his family to San Diego in 1932. He fought under the name of Kid Zulu as a professional boxer until the age of 18, when he began as a driver for his brother Joe's band, the Honey Drippers. Liggins started his own recording career as a singer, guitarist, and leader of the band Drops of Joy. Blues singer Edna Hicks was born on October 14th in 1891 in New Orleans. Her recorded songs include Hard Luck Blues and Pour Me Blues. She also recorded Downhearted Blues and Gulf Coast Blues on the Brunswick label in 1923. She was popular in black vaudeville in the American Midwest in the late 1910s and 20s, and appeared often in Chicago and Cincinnati. She made recordings for 7 different record labels in 1923 and 1924. James Son Thomas was born on October 14, 1926, near Eden, Mississippi. As a self-taught guitarist, he learned to play songs from older blues guitarists like Elmore Davis and Arthur Big Boy Crudup. While working as a grave digger, he also became a folk artist, making sculptures from unfired clay, which he dug out of the banks of the Yazoo River. His most famous sculpted images were skulls, which often featured actual human teeth, and it mirrored his job as a grave digger and his often stated philosophy that we all end up in the clay. Blues singer Victoria Spivey was born in Houston, Texas on October 15th in 1906. Spivey was one of the more influential blues women simply because she was around long enough to influence legions of younger women and men who rediscovered blues music during the mid-60s. Spivey could do it all. She wrote songs, she sang them well, and accompanied herself on piano, organ, and occasionally the ukulele. Delta blues guitarist Big Joe Williams was born October 16, 1903. He actually played a 9-string guitar. Born near Crawford, Mississippi, as a youth he began wandering across the country busking and playing in stores, bars, alleys, and work camps. During the early 1930s, Williams was accompanied on his travels through the Mississippi Delta by a young Muddy Waters. He later became a regular on the concert and coffeehouse circuits, touring Europe and Japan, and performed at major U.S. music festivals. On October 16, 1953, The Things That I Used to Do was recorded by Guitar Slim in New Orleans, where a young Ray Charles arranged and produced the session. It was released on a single in 1953 and became a bestseller the following year. First released only to a southern U.S. rural audience, urban R&B stations in the North began airing the song and built it into a national hit. The single stayed on the Billboard's Rhythm and Blues charts for 42 weeks. And as a result, Guitar Slim became an in-demand performer and played at venues such as the Apollo Theater in New York City. Mississippi Hill Country Blues guitarist and singer Jessie Mae Hemphill was born October 18th in 1923. Hemphill was born near Como, Mississippi, in the northern Mississippi Hill Country, just east of the Mississippi Delta. She began playing the guitar at the age of 7. Aside from sitting in at Memphis bars a few times in the 1950s, most of her playing was done in family and informal settings, such as picnics with fife and drum music, until she finally recorded in 1979. Detroit blues, boogie-woogie, and jazz pianist Boogie Woogie Red was born October 18th in 1925. He was born Vernon Harrison in Rayville, Louisiana, and moved to Detroit in 1927. In his teens, he began performing at local clubs under the influence of local musicians like Big Maceo and Dr. Clayton. Red taught himself piano, developing his own keyboard style. When he was 18, he was drawn to the blues scene in Chicago, where he jammed with Lonnie Johnson, Tampa Red, and Memphis Slim. At different times in his career, he worked with Sonny Boy Williamson, Washboard Willie, Baby Boy Warren, and John Lee Hooker. Chuck Berry was born October 18th in 1926. Nicknamed the father of rock and roll, he refined and developed rhythm and blues into the major elements that made rock and roll today. Born into a middle-class family in St. Louis, Berry had an interest in music from an early age and gave his first public performance at Sumner High School. By 1953, influenced by the guitar riffs and showmanship of the blues musician T-Bone Walker, Berry began performing with the Lonnie Johnson Trio. His break came in Chicago when Muddy Waters suggested he contact Chess Records. Chicago blues artist Johnny Temple was born October 18th in 1906 in Canton, Mississippi. He was most active in the 1930s and 40s. He learned to play guitar and mandolin as a child, and in his teen years began playing at house parties. While in Jackson, Mississippi, he became friends with Skip James. He moved to Chicago in the early 1930s and started playing with Joe McCoy in the burgeoning Chicago blues scenes. Well, blues fans, we just covered some of the highlights here. Now, if you want to know more about these artists or other things that happened this week in the blues, then be sure to follow our social media pages, or just go visit our website at bigtrainblues.com. We'll have a new episode next week, so we'll see you then.